My name is Joaquin Fox. I'm a community organizer and a racial equity strategist. Um, my pronouns are he, him, his, and I have been throughout this summer doing community organizing work around not only police brutality and police reform, abolition, but also just community organizing around building people power and building the power of um, residents outside of the usual systems that we're asked to participate in, framing that in racial equity and racial justice as well. For me personally, I've thought of it as this phenomenon where you relinquish like the specificity of your origin, your culture, which would actually add to the value of how we use and identify race in America. You relinquish that opportunity to identify in those ways because you understand the political and economic power of just being white without other identifiers. And so that's been a really interesting experience to see because, again, like the value of America or the proposed or espoused value of America is that we're a melting pot of all of these ethnic and racial identities that would inherently allow us all to contribute from a very specific place of culture and identity. And white supremacy being the opposite of that experience, which makes us deny the values and ideals that America has espoused in the first place. You'd think that good police would want to work with community activist organizers to find ways to increase that prevention because the lack of crime is the success of that entity. But we don't see that often, and we have to wonder why, because that's not what the police were made to do. And that's not what they see their jobs as in the first place. So they see and truly understand that their identity is based on how they enforce white supremacy and capitalism. And they know the necessity of that work to support the people that they want to support, and it is not the community. So I've seen that realized over the summer with the amount of enmity that they've approached Black and Brown community organizers, Black and Brown protesters, or even white people that agree with those ideas. And it's been with excessive violence and viciousness that it's inappropriate for the field. And so I see policing as a real physical enforcement of the ideas of white supremacy and capitalism. Sure, I think it's really important to make that hyper local. And so me personally, before the summer began, and I start the summer as like May 30th, just because that was when James Scurlock was killed by a known racist and white supremacist in our community. And before that, I was doing philanthropy work. And so a lot of the work was based in the political and social realms without having a real connection to the community identity and the community impact. And so when the decision came from a county attorney to not press charges on this known white supremacist and racist in our community, I felt emboldened and obligated to transition my role into more of a community facing and community power building role. And so that's when I started the demonstration at Don Klein's house that lasted 36 days as an opportunity to harness the massive amount of energy that was happening in Omaha and to guide it into a hyper local focus. And again, this demonstration was about his decision not to press charges on Jake Gardner. It had nothing to do with policing, but to be met on this issue by the police with that same kind of tension, one, didn't make sense to me, but two, really allowed for us to understand, like, if you threaten white supremacy in one realm, it will be met in all of these other realms, both the social, the political, and with this kind of violent power. The one I'm really interested in diving more into is around the murder of Vivian Strong, and how that's always kind of framed in this idea of a race riot, and what that really allows people that are doing historical work or people that are just investigating, what that allows them to discount about that experience, and how that allows, and how that even that wording is a framing that benefits white supremacy and capitalism. And so to really think back on these times of racial tension, and really ensuring that we're using the right words. And it's the same thing that they did with the Tulsa massacre. For so often it's been called a race riot, when the truth is this was a massacre done by white people to Black people. And so there's no riot that implies an equal amount of force or power. The reality is that that is a specific tool for disenfranchisement, and that's its only purpose in our society today, because people aren't committing less crimes. It is not a deterrent to crime, and it isn't a place that people are rehabilitated. So this is specifically utilized to disenfranchise people from their political power and their social power and their economic power. The more people that they put in jail, the more people that don't have jobs, the more people that are contributing to slave labor, which I'm really proud to say that Nebraska voted slavery out of its state constitution, which was shocking to me, to not, to be honest, but a really happy moment, even though 30% of people tried to keep it in, but it passed, and we'll see how that impacts incarcerated populations. But to just really be aware of how that's used to add political power to some, because we know that most often those institutions are put into rural communities that are majority white, and that they are still used to count population, but that population does not have a voice. So people that are housing these institutions are gaining so much political power from the amount of bodies that are being placed inside of their districts, in precincts, and but also silencing the voices that they're using to build their power off of. So it's inherently used for disenfranchisement. There is no other meaningful reason. And if we're being honest about that, fits quite perfectly into the system of white supremacy and capitalism. One of my favorite mantras is that organizing work is life work, and the thing that you contribute in your everyday life is a thing that you can bring to this movement work. And you don't have to learn a different skill to be a part of this movement. If there's something that you're passionate and really able to do, you can do that in this work, and it contributes to this, because we're trying to build a whole new world, and all of those skills are necessary in that new world. The thing that I'm most looking forward to next year is obviously engaging in local elections. Obviously, the national election was so important because it does create kind of a culture shift, and it does really we will see some meaningful things change because of that change of leadership. And so I do want to acknowledge that, as much as we're not happy with the choices that we had, there is meaningful change based on that choice. But city elections are really where your day-to-day is impacted. And so I think it'll be really important for people to come out and really understand their options, because the fields are crowded. There's tons of new people coming to this work. And we have to make sure that we're there, one, to hear their ideas, and two, to hold them accountable to their promises as they get these new elected offices. So we'll be doing a lot of education work around our city council candidates, around our mayoral candidates, that I want people to watch. And then our next legislative session happens in 2021. And some personal work that I'm doing along with some other organizers is creating a racial justice slate of legislation in partnership with quite a few senators, a lot of the senators that signed on to that racial justice special session that didn't happen last year, are really interested in bringing up a lot of those bills into this session. So we'll be helping them organize those ideas and create the real messaging that's community-led and community-based, and allows for a real investment from faces we haven't seen before, to talk about important issues. So we're really excited to have our hands in the elections, and then also to talk about that legislative session.